You're listening to a LeftLion podcast. Welcome to episode 12 of the LeftLion Interviews podcast. My name is Jared Wilson and I'm the editor-in-chief and co-founder of LeftLion. I'm delighted to introduce today's guest, James Graham. So, some of you might not have heard of James's name before, but unless you've been living under a rock, then you've probably come across some of his work on stage and screen. Firstly, he's a big deal in the theatre. To date, he's written about 35 plays which have been performed in theatres around the UK and beyond from 2005 right up to now. So to put that into perspective, they think Shakespeare only wrote about 38 plays, although it's admittedly a little bit premature for us to start comparing the two. James also has a prolific career as a screenwriter, and he's written TV dramas like Brexit, the Uncivil War, which starred Rory, Kinnear and Benedict Cumberbatch, Quiz, which starred Michael Sheen and Matthew McFadden, and most recently Brian and Maggie, which starred Steve Coogan and Harriet Walter. However, James's biggest TV baby is the primetime BBC One drama Sherwood, for which he is the showrunner. Now, speaking as someone born and bred in Sherwood, it still confuses me a little bit to see a show like this being advertised when I open up BBC iPlayer. Clearly it also confuses some of my old friends who aren't from around here, and they often send me text messages asking things like, is that what it's like where you live? So James has quite a lot going on at the moment. As we recorded this interview, he was in a hotel room in New York, and that was because Punch, which is a play he wrote about a man from the Meadows called Jacob Dunne, who killed a man with one punch, is heading to Broadway over there, and that premieres over there in September. However, in mid-September, James will actually be back over this side of the pond, and he'll be back in Nottingham. His play Dear England, which tells the story of Gareth Southgate's tenure as England football manager, is playing at Nottingham's Theatre Royal, and it's a big part of their 160th birthday celebrations. I discuss all these things and more with James over the next hour.
Hi, this is Sophie from LeftLion, Nottingham's iconic culture magazine. Each month we publish a beautiful free magazine that shines a light on the art, music, food, literature and more that makes Nottingham such a vibrant and creative city to live in. It's a bit unusual for a local print magazine to exist these days, but we've managed to keep going for over 20 years, giving the city's artists, photographers and writers a platform to publish their work. We distribute 15,000 copies in over 300 venues across the county, and you can find LeftLion in every local library, every Castle Rock pub, in all active Nottingham leisure centres, and all the best bars, cafes and hangouts in Nottingham. If you're ever in town at the start of the month, you may have seen our LeftLion bike rolling around the streets. In line with our pledge to be a carbon neutral company, we deliver our magazines on foot, by electric bicycle or where strictly necessary by van. You can also read the full magazine and lots more for free at leftlion.co.uk. Check out the events listings on our website to find out what's going on in Notts, and if you'd like to promote your business or organisation with us, please visit leftlion.co.uk/advertise.
Well, let's firstly talk about New York. So I assume you're there for Punch, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, Nottingham comes to Broadway. It's very, very surreal, very weird, but really exciting. Yeah, so this is the first week of rehearsals, and we open, I think, at the end of September.
Excellent. And what is it you think Broadway, because obviously it's a play written by a guy from Nottingham, directed by a guy from Nottingham, about a lot of people in Nottingham and that, that horrible incident that happened. What is it you think that appeals so universally in New York?
Yeah, it's a good question. I asked all the theatre producers and the people who brought the show over, who saw it at the Nottingham Playhouse, and then saw it when it moved to London. And I kept sort of checking. Are you absolutely sure you think this show set in the Meadows council estate in Nottingham and about the East Midlands will resonate on Broadway, the home of Wicked and Chicago the musical? And that, I guess, they reassured me that, I guess, even though it's very specific culturally, obviously the themes in it about justice and what is justice and how do you handle grief and what is the power of forgiveness, this extraordinary act that the play looks at, which is essentially the manner in which the parents of the of a victim of a one-point punch on a Saturday night out in Nottingham, how they managed to go on a different journey with the person who harmed them, the person who killed their son, to release themselves from their own grief. Um, people seem to find that really interesting or inspiring or beautiful, and so do I. I could say that immodestly. It's not my play; it's just the actual real life story that I still find so sort of impossibly moving. I think that probably resonates across borders, and arguably specifically in America, who are going through their own constant crises in their own justice and their own legal system. And they have huge problems over here, as people probably know, with regards to young men and incarceration. And I think in that way, it's probably really relevant as well.
Hmm. Amazing. Right. I mean, I've got loads of questions. I don't want to talk about your whole career, but I think we should also talk about this about Dear England because
Sure.
it's the big deal in Nottingham at the Theatre Royal in September. So firstly, like I've read that you were watching that 2018 tournament, and this is kind of where the idea for turning it into a play pops into your head. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I don't know if you can remember that far back. It feels like an age ago, doesn't it? But yeah, 2018 was the Russia
Mm.
World Cup. It was the first tournament that Gareth Southgate was the England men's manager. And I mean, I remember going back a couple of years before that, the absolute low point of being an England fan. It was about sort of 8, 10 years of just getting into a rhythm of exiting tournaments early, or sometimes not even qualifying, certainly never getting beyond anything like the quarterfinals or beyond. But also actually just the feeling towards the team. It didn't feel like a good, healthy uh, environment or culture of sort of young men. It was the age of, and this is no disrespect to any individuals. I think it was just across the sport, being the early age of wags and the age of tabloid scandals and a certain kind of macho England bloke that was very different to what we suddenly started to see in 2018, and that was an entirely different feeling of. I just remember watching those lads, Harry Kane, Jordan Pickford, Raheem Sterling, Marcus Rashford. I just remember watching them as they emerged in that tournament and how they conducted and handled themselves, which was just slightly different. And I think that all came from the kind of character and the ethos of Gareth Southgate, who people thought was too nice, too decent, too compassionate, too nerdy, too shy to be the England manager. But actually, something about his ethos and his approach meant everyone just felt really good about the England football team all of a sudden, and how these men were conducting themselves on the pitch and off the pitch. And of course, but I mean, the main reason is the Shakespearean structure of it really delighted me. The idea that the guy who was most famous for missing a huge penalty in 1996, which had he not missed, would have broken this curse and brought football home. The fact that 20 years later he comes back and really wants to interrogate and analyze that problem. What is it about England and penalties? Why were we statistically at that time the worst in the world at taking penalties? We'd never won a World Cup penalty shootout. And he had the bravery to really look at his own trauma, to understand why that pressure, why that fear meant that we were so terrible, and what it is about putting on an England shirt as a young Englishman. And he nailed it. He took us he took us to our first ever penalty shootout, which we won in a World Cup. And that the neatness of that structure, and me wanting to understand how does someone enter an organization and change it culturally, change the environment, not just the results, but the whole feeling of a place, I found really, really fascinating. And that's how it began.
Hmm. And I'm right in thinking that you met him. I know it was after you started writing it, but you got the chance to have an audience with him, didn't you?
Yeah, a few times actually. He was great in a very Gareth Southgate way. He was very humble and really semi sort of mortified about being in a play, and didn't think he was worthy of an actor like Joseph Fiennes, who originated the role, that he wasn't worthy of famous actor playing him. But he was happy to meet and help me research and understand the show, and I've met him a few times since, and I continue to be just a real fan of the guy for both his personality and his character, but just his philosophy, like what he stands for.
Hmm. I mean, I think, look, I'm a football fan too, and I totally get what you mean about what he brought to England because there was just there was a culture for a long time of giant man babies, isn't there? Do you know? Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that still exists in big football, in big Premier League football, but to an extent. But at the same time, he bought something that was just nice, decent, and quite quintessentially English as well, in a way that I feel proud of, rather than flag beating chess things. So
I
yeah,
think
I mean, I agree.
I think you've nailed it. I think I think the people who criticize or question his approach, what would they? I guess they would say, "Oh, it's not tough enough. It's quite strong. It doesn't, it's not, it doesn't have that explosive fire and aggression and competitiveness and thirst that people expect from a an England football team. I mean, traditionally, the style of play in England used to be just very physical, didn't it? It was about being a huge wall of power and just blasting balls up the field and being this huge block of defence. And I'm not, I mean, that has total value. But I agree with you. I think weirdly for me, where Gareth Southgate's interpretation of Englishness and masculinity comes from is not some people would call it sort of modern and woke and liberal and progressive, but actually it's very traditional. He got all of his values and his identity about being English from like his granddad, from flying in the being being in the Second World War, that decency, that goodness, fair play. So immediately in 2018 when he first took over, he was like, we are not going to be the guys who dive on the pitch and pull our opponents down. We won the Fair Play Award for the first time in ages. And it was just that kind of Englishness, which again, people can roll their eyes at and go, I'd rather just win the fucking trophy. But actually, I think that this is how we are moving forward towards a place where we are going to win a trophy again. We've had the best series of results since Alf Ramsey. In fact, even better than Alf Ramsey in terms of, what is it, semi-final, quarter-final, final. Like we were on our way now to being able to win a tournament again, and that did not feel the case. That felt a long way away in 2016, and I think that's both because of the strategy and the tactics on the pitch, but also the character building and the cultural work that Gareth did off the pitch.
Mm. So, so are you a football fan then? I mean, obviously you're local to Nottingham. Do you support Forest, County, Stags, someone else?
Indeed, Nottingham Forest, I got absolutely eviscerated, and rightly so, once for getting for calling them Notts Forest on Sherwood, my TV show. Well, an actor did, and I had to apologise in front of the city on breakfast radio the morning after, and rightly so. There is no such team as Notts Forest. Yeah, I mean, a bit like the truth is a bit. Growing up, I wasn't like obsessive in terms of club football. I used to go and watch Mansfield Town. I used to go and watch Nottingham Forest. But it was just England. I don't know, there's something about international tournaments and international football, and England in particular. Those big tournament World Cup games that just something completely took over me. I used to get so emotional as a kid or as a teenager watching those games. I think it's something about the drama of it, the history of it, the scale of it that always just completely compelled me.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the best things about watching England is that I'm a Notts County fan. A lot of my best friends are Forest fans,
Oldest football
and
player in
you're
the
from Mansfield sort of way, but it does mean that finally you're all together and you're there with all your mates supporting the same team.
Okay, that's exactly right. Yeah, completely. It unite. Well, it should. It doesn't always, but it should unite us all around one side. Yeah.
Hmm. Right, let's any more I wanted to ask you about that. I think oh yeah, no, I wanted to ask you. I think I've read that there's some rewrites to the Dear England that we'll see in Nottingham based upon the 2024 tournament. Is that correct?
We already began that version actually in the National Theatre early this year, but this is the first time that production is leaving London and going on tour. And I cannot tell you how important it was to me that we open in Nottingham. So the press night opening of the tour, we do a week of previews in Plymouth, and then we open properly in Nottingham, the theatre where I got my first ever theatre job on stage door 20 odd years ago. So yeah, that's really thrilling, and yeah, basically it's a new version of the play that includes the Euros in 2024 in Germany, and goes all the way up to Gareth's retirement, and that was not the in the original version a couple of years ago that we took to the West End because he was still the manager and the story had not ended, and now it has ended. The Gareth
Mm,
Southgate project is over, so we can tell the full story now.
mm, amazing. Well, I want to talk about like the very beginnings of your not necessarily career, but when you started to become a writer. So you grew up in Kirkby-in-Ashfield, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What what was it that kicked it off? Did you always know you wanted to be a writer? Were you sitting there as a youngster, at a computer or with a notebook?
God no, God no. I mean, I was really creative. I did used to enjoy writing stories and drawing comics and stuff. And I was probably more introverted than your average Kirkby lad who I'd like spending time on my own in my room. And yeah, I was definitely really creative, but like probably most people, the idea of theatre, the idea of being a playwright or writing scripts for TV and film, that just wasn't in our world. My parents weren't in creative jobs. My mum worked at the local Prologue warehouse in Annesley. My dad worked for the Nottingham Council, but it was school. I was so lucky. I went to Ashfield Comprehensive School, and they had a working theatre in their building and an amazing drama teacher. And so they would do school plays, big productions in the summer and at Christmas, and just drama was a big part of the ethos in that school in a way that God in today's world, the way that creativity and humanities and art subject are completely dropped from the main curriculum is really devastating. So yeah, I just really fell in love with performing was the starting point, I guess, was being in plays and finding confidence in doing that and telling stories to an audience, and that from there on, I was just encouraged to sort of pursue that academically. I went and did a drama degree at Hull University, and started writing scripts and plays there.
We know it's hard having to wait a whole month in between LeftLion magazines. Heck, it's difficult enough getting through the week. Worry not, listener, we've answered the call. You can get a pithy, up-to-date digest of the best stuff going on in Nottingham each week direct to your inbox every Wednesday by signing up to the LeftLion Weekly newsletter. LeftLion Weekly contains our top recommendations of events, new content, exclusive competitions and more besides. So what are you waiting for? Visit leftlion.co.uk/newsletter to sign up now.
You mentioned Ashfield School, okay?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to this is your life here or anything, but one of their teachers actually got in touch with us recently, not knowing that we were doing this interview because the only people I've told are the Theatre Royal. And do you know about this Save the Ashfield School Theatre campaign that's happening?
I really do. Yeah, it's insane. Yeah, I've known it's been developing a while. So yeah, basically, as you've probably been told, they're rebuilding. They're knocking down the old school that I went to that was built in the '60s, and rebuilding a new version of it in the school field. And inexplicably, the Department of Education has they said they were going to build it like for like, and just make it a more modern building. But for some reason, the one building they are not going to replicate, and rebuild is a theatre. They don't think a school like that needs it, and it's incomprehensible to me. So I'm going to do all that I can to support that campaign. It's only just getting started. I'm convinced that once the school year returns and that we can get going, that we'll be able to make our case. But yeah, it's. How did you hear about that?
So one of their staff emailed us, honestly, and we didn't scout for it. They didn't know I was interviewing you. They did mention
Okay.
that you were a pupil there, and I said I did say to them we should be speaking soon, and that I'd get in touch with you and ask you about it, basically.
Yeah.
Look, any way we can help with this. I mean, we're going to put it in the magazine. It's here on the podcast now as well. But please keep us informed as to how we can help, and I'll let the school know that as well. If ever
No, I
there was a
will.
theatre
Yeah.
that should bear your name, James.
That's very kind. Yeah, I mean, I can't. I just it really is maddening. I got a bit upset about it. Not for just for the personal reasons of that is the place that I fell in love with the career that I now have, and I feel very lucky to be a playwright who's working so prominently in the UK and across the world. And it came from that school, that state school, that theatre. And I just can't bear the idea that Eton has three theatres. Why can a private school in London have three theatres and a comprehensive school in a relatively socially deprived majority working class area in the country? Why is it not important that those kids get the same? It's so short term, so short sighted, and just shows how over the years the government's belief that there is any value in creative expression or in teaching kids imagination and creative skills has just dropped off the list, and it's utterly bizarre. So thank you. I hope you can support it, and yeah, I'll definitely stay in touch.
Mm. Um, so going through what I've read about your career, you spent a year. So next is that you mentioned it earlier, but you spent a year as the doorkeeper at the Theatre Royal. Was that 2004
Yeah,
sort of time?
it would have
Tell us
been,
about
yeah.
your memories of that.
Yeah, God, well, that was my, yeah, I kind of loved it. I mean, so it's a bizarre job. The stage doorkeeper is basically the person who runs the backstage, the entrance to the backstage area. So in a big old touring venue like the Royal Centre in Nottingham, there's two venues, Theatre Royal and the concert hall. You're responsible for welcoming all the shows that come in every week or every night. So that might be Dire Straits or Blondie in the concert hall, and then a musical or a West End show in the Theatre Royal. And you assign the actors dressing rooms and you look after the crew. And it's brilliant. I loved it. I mean, it's again, that's why it's so mad to me that I'm now touring a show that's going to be, moving through that same building. And 20 years ago, I was imagining a career as a writer in the theatre. So yeah, that was brilliant. I got to see loads of shows and meet loads of people. I was only 20, I've been 21, 22. Didn't have a clue about theatre, professional theatre. Didn't know what I was going, how I was going to make a living out of it. So just to spend about a year doing a proper job in theatre, backstage, meeting all sorts of people and learning about how you make a show. That was really brilliant. It was really tough. It was like you do long days, like 8 in the morning to sometimes 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night until the shows came down and the shows left. But yeah, it was great to see sort of theatre from behind as well as from in front.
Hmm. Was there anybody that came through that you remember particularly well? Anybody that was just kind? Any famous people? Anything like that?
I know loads, and some actors I've worked with since. For people like I'm going to can't remember any of the names now. I remember one of my earliest weeks there was looking after Joan Collins. She was very
Wow.
glamorous, and I know, yeah. I remember every night I had to smuggle her out through a secret door that no one is meant to know about, so she could avoid press and things. And that was wild. I spent a big old pantomime. The panto season is a huge chunk of your year, and that runs from like November to February. And so Danny LaRue was the dame in that year with Bobby Davo, I think, and people like that. So you get to really know them. I helped Danny LaRue get his Christmas turkey from Marks and Spencer's down in Nottingham. Things like that. Yeah, it was great. It was really fun. But yeah, just actually loads of work, good, solid workaday actors who would pass through the theatre. That since then I've sometimes popped in my dramas and directors and yeah, it's been great.
Hmm. One other early thing I wanted to ask you about. I mean, obviously, earliest I've heard you're a twin. Is that correct?
I am, yeah, I am.
Are you close with your? It's a sister, right? You've got a sister. I mean, you can't really
Yeah,
say no, you're
exactly.
not close, but do you like think the same things?
Oh God, no, no. It's like nowhere close to being sort of telepathic. In fact, I think she'd be the first to admit sometimes we struggle even with like normal conversation, let alone subliminal conversation. No, I mean, yeah, I love her loads. She's brilliant, and we both sort of loved drama and stuff like that too. So we did school plays together. She went to study drama up in Scarborough. I went and studied in Hull. So we both pursued those kind of passions. We're very different people with different wants and needs. She still lives very happily up in Kirkby-in-Ashfield, and I've obviously moved away. That's made it sometimes hard to sort of stay in touch, but yeah, it's great whenever like she came down to London to watch the London version of Punch when it moved there a couple of months ago. So it was great for her to come and see my work. And yeah, why do you ask that? Are you a twin?
No, I'm not a twin, but I am always fascinated by twins, really. I think well, everybody is, aren't they, really? It's kind of, you know, I think if you are a twin, then it feels like you know something that I don't, really.
Oh God, I wish it was as mystical and as amazing as that. Sometimes I forget. Like I just say, "Oh, I've got a sister," and then I go, "Oh yeah, and she was born on the same day as me." But it's like a secondary thought. It's not like a this hugely yeah evolved impressive thing. But yeah, yeah, I'm very lucky.
Hmm. So your first, after the Theatre Royal, you started, was that when you moved to Finborough Theatre in London, yeah? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's the Finborough Theatre in St Earl's Court. It's like a tiny 50-seat theatre above a pub. Yeah.
So it looks like that place punches hard for a 50-seat theatre, right? Tell us about the early plays you put on there.
Yeah, it did. I mean, it was. I obviously growing up in Nottingham, I'd never heard of it. I didn't even really understand how the model of theatre that works down in London. I mean, you got sort of the commercial sector in the West End, and you got the big subsidised public theatres paid for by from the Arts Council funding, like the National Theatre, who are like the BBC of theatre. Their job is to find and encourage riskier work. And then you have something called the fringe. So these really small scale venues in warehouses, in basements, above pubs that scrape any money together that they can from various places and put on sort of scrappier work with very little money. And when I was actually working at the stage door at the Theatre Royal, I began writing my first like full length play. And that was the theatre. I did some research on the internet, and that was the theatre that felt like it most suited the kind of play that I was writing, which was a historical drama about. It was called Albert's Boy, and it was about way before Christopher Nolan came on along years ago. It was about Albert Einstein's guilt over his involvement in the atomic bomb, sort of politically encouraging the Manhattan Project, and the guilt he suffered towards in his later life. I guess I started writing that because it was, God, it would have been 2004, 2005. So we were still with all the anxiety of the Iraq War and weapons of mass destruction. And this isn't a very sophisticated thought, but I just thought an origin, what was the first weapon of mass destruction? Is it worth going back in time and looking at that to make sense of what was happening at the time? And yeah, that was the play and sent it off to this theatre and they read it and 2 weeks later they called me back. I was in a dressing room at the Nottingham Theatre Royal when I took the call and they said they wanted to do my play. I remember looking out over the trams and thinking, oh my gosh, I've got a play in London. I can't believe it. And yeah, so moved down there and that was great, but I'm like really tough. Like this is the period where most people kind of give up because there was no money in doing plays for 4 or 5 years in that small venue, which is what I did. So you have to work all the hours God sends, and I was working in bars and warehouses and factories and telecommunications, and then writing as hard as I could late at night when I came home, living on mates' floors and blow up beds and that kind of thing, which sounds really romantic and everything. And actually, I probably did sort of enjoy it more at the time than I realized. But yes, that was like 4 or 5 years of just doing quite big, ambitious plays with no money in a tiny space, but honing my voice and getting, critics coming to see it, people writing about your shows in newspapers, getting agents, getting a literary agent who then can start supporting you and promoting your work, and yeah, it kind of all went from there.
Hmm. So, I mean, I'm right in thinking the first kind of major play you did was This House, which was at the National Theatre in 2012. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's right. I guess that was the biggest one. So that would have been 7, 8 years after I first started working at the Fimbra, and you sort of scale up to bigger theatres. And the National Theatre, for those who don't know, it's sort of a huge it's the nation's theatre. It's a huge theatre on the south bank of the Thames in London, and it's got 3 different venues. And This House, yeah, was a play they commissioned me to write after coming to see some of my smaller plays, and that took me about a year to write. And it was about this was really boring. It was about the 1970 late 70s minority Labour government, but specifically set in the Whip's office in Parliament, and how those whips, the MPs whose job it is to manage other members of Parliament, how they helped the government, a minority government, survive in a very difficult and crazy period of our history. So sort of semi-comic, semi-serious, semi-epic. And yeah, that was 2012, and for some reason that seemed to go really well and capture loads of attention. Loads of politicians came to see it, and that transferred and moved to bigger spaces. Then went to the West End, then went on tour, and that was, yeah, I guess as a distillation of the kind of plays I like to write: history, political, quite big stories, big companies, lots of characters. That was sort of the apotheosis of the kind of thing I was really interested in.
Hmm. So, I mean, as you mentioned, it ran for 7 years, right? And like I've read
On
that
and
Phil
off, yeah.
Daniels was in the cast. Is that right?
Yeah. He was great. We had like in the first version we had an actor called Philip Glenister, who was the actor in Life on Mars, played that police officer. And Phil Daniels, yeah, he was brilliant. We actually, because we had a band in the play as well. I always try to like incorporate music and movement into my show. So it's not just dry dialogue, that it feels like full theatre, even though it's a play, but it has sort of the theatre elements of a musical. So we had a live band playing music in Parliament, in the setting of Parliament, and it was all sort of 70s punk and glam rock. We had David Bowie and everything like that. So yeah, so we got Phil Daniels to sing 5 years by Bowie, and that was brilliant. He was amazing. Yeah, I was completely starstruck. He was such a good guy.
Mm. So I'm kind of taking steps through your career now, but the next thing that stood out was Finding Neverland. Tell us about your role on that. It had Gary Barlow and Kelsey Grammer were involved in it, right?
That is right. Yeah, gosh, that's over 10 years ago now, and that was my first musical. Yeah, and I never thought I'd be. I'm not remotely musical. I can't sing a note. But but that was a strange one actually. So that was a creative team had tried to adapt the movie at Finding Neverland, was starring Johnny Depp and Kate Winslet, about J.M. Barrie, the playwright, and how he invented Peter Pan and Captain Hook. And it's a really good story. And I was brought on quite late, as was Gary, to replace an existing team actually, because they didn't think it was working. And so I came in late to a project that wasn't mine, but I had to learn very quickly how to write the book of a musical. So that's what they call it, the book, which is just obviously the story, the characters, the structure, and the dialogue between the songs. Met Gary Barlow and met him in his studio in northwest London. I'd always been a big fan of his, and have take that growing up, and we started working, and it was a very different way to work. Obviously, as a playwright, it's more of a sole endeavor. You work a lot on your own, in your own head. Musicals are very collaborative. You have to work with lyricists, composers, and loads of different people, choreographers to build the show. And that opened on Broadway. It was my first Broadway show. That opened there, I think, in 2015.
Hmm, intriguing. So I'm going to fast forward to 2017. It looks like at this point you've got four plays being performed around the country. So you've got Ink, which is about the Murdoch Empire, Quiz, which is about Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and both of those end up on the West End. And Ink went to Broadway. Is that right?
Yeah, you went to the Broadway Theatre House, where I'm actually at now. Yeah, where Punch is going. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. Did I mean? And I listened to you on Lauren Laverne's show saying, that because obviously, like, it sounds like you work really hard, basically, and I'm sure a lot of people work hard. I think, I'm not sure where you fit sleep in,
Yeah.
but did it feel like things were changing for you at this point? I mean, I suppose you're how many years into London? You'd like 12, 13 years into your first break in London.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So I was by that point, I was in my early mid 30s, and yeah, I felt very settled, and I was constantly getting work, which is obviously really great, and you can't guarantee that's going to happen particularly in this industry. No, that was a real moment, I remember. So there was just a weird thing that happened that seemed to sort of catch people's imagination, which was I had, yeah, as you said, about four plays on that year, but two of them were running at the same time in theatres in the West End, and they just happened. It doesn't mean anything, but they just happened to be next door to each other. It was, I think, Ink was at the Duke of York's Theatre, and a play called Labour of Love, which was actually set in the Labour MP's office in Kirkby-in-Ashfield. So that's what that play was about, and it was great to put Kirkby-in-Ashfield on the West End stage. That starred Martin Freeman, a little gorgeous actor from The Office and Sherlock and things. So that was in the theatre next door, and I think for some reason a writer hadn't had a play in next door West End theatres since, I think, Oscar Wilde or something like that in the 1800s. So it didn't really mean anything. It was just a coincidence that I had plays next door to each other running at the same time. But because that hadn't happened for hundreds of years, it just got lots of very lovely attention, and you take a moment and you try to enjoy that. I remember walking down that street with my drama school teacher from Ashfield School, and seeing the two theatres next to each other with my name on it. And it's important to check that moment and go, "That's amazing. I'm really proud of that," but also not be overwhelmed by it, and not that not become the thing. No, you should never become a playwright because of your ego or your vanity, because you'll absolutely destroy yourself, because there's so much rejection, there's so much pain, and vulnerability when you're an artist and you're sharing your work. It's not always going to go well, so you have to sort of keep yourself grounded a bit. And also, as you sort of slightly referred to as well, I don't think I have a great relationship always to work and the pressure I put myself under and the amount that I do. And I was also so I had to briefly we know when you get those dopamine hits when you've got loads of work on and you get the satisfaction of that, you have to just make sure you're checking that that is not the reason why you're getting up every day in the morning. It's not to overwork yourself into an early grave. You've got to try and find value and meaning and pleasure and leisure in other things as well. So even though I was very proud of that moment that you refer to, I also I can't be too proud because otherwise I'll never sleep an hour in my life, and you've got to make sure you balance it all out.
Hmm. So, according to my research now, you've written about 35 plays to date.
Jesus, have I? Fucking hell! All right.
Yeah. So, do you have like a personal favorite, or is it always the current one you're thinking of?
That's a good
What are your
question.
favorites?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, you do sort of love them all for their own individual strengths and weaknesses, and actually also because it's not they're not novels. They're plays which have productions attached to them. So sometimes you get very affectionate about the production, like the actors that were in it, or the director, or the theatre, or the time in your life when it was being produced and performed. And you might not even particularly like that play, but that experience of making it is a particularly pleasurable one or a nice memory. I mean, this house was a big deal. Was a big deal for me. It was amazing to see it in a huge theatre and then see that go to the West End and around the country. Honestly, I'd say Dear England is a really important one to me because of what I hope it tries to achieve, which is given my background, given everything we've just talked about, not coming from theatre, not having theatre in my life growing up. I feel so lucky that I was accidentally introduced to theatre by an amazing drama teacher, but not everybody gets that. And the mission behind Dear England, taking football and trying to put it into a play, it's probably self-evident, but it's to try and get people who don't normally think that theatre is for them or wouldn't contemplate going to see a play to come and give it a go. And when we moved Dear England into the West End, it moved to a theatre called the Prince Edward Theatre, which is about a 1,900 seat theatre, so really big for a theatre. And a play hadn't been in that venue since before the Second World War. It's normally big musicals or big concerts. So, and we managed to get a play in there because it was big enough and because the audience desire and appetite for it was big enough. And we had tens of thousands of people coming to see a West End play who'd never ever seen a play before, but just loved football, but just loved the idea of a play about Gareth Southgate. And you'd look around and you'd see, kids and families were in football tops, their local clubs, and it not being that stuffy theatre environment, it being a welcoming place for different people, and also people who loved theatre but didn't have a clue about football. Is that the plays for them as well? So just that having that mix and feeling like it cut through, like it broke through the normal barriers of theatre, was really important, really special for me. And it's going to be, it is. You talking about moments in the past that were special, but I'm thinking forward now to opening night at the Nottingham Theatre Royal when that play, goes to that theatre, that stage that I spent so many hours on, walking around at night with my big bunch of keys, locking up every night. That's going to be a real moment for me and my family.
Mm, wonderful. So, I've heard you describe your style as journalism on stage. Can you unpack that a little bit? I'm fascinated by the way you said
I remember saying that, but I guess it's yeah. I mean, I guess I really enjoy taking real life stories, ideally quite recent British history, specifically British history. I'm obsessed by this country that we live in and trying to make sense of it. And I think we've been going through a particular chapter in our history as Brits of the past 10, 15 years that is fascinating for an old country like ours. It's been pretty chaotic and sometimes dangerous and ups and downs, highs and lows. So I just really like finding stories, little stories in pockets of our public life, whether that's in a newspaper office or a football team or Parliament or the light entertainment industry, a quiz show, where you can take a story vehicle and into that try to explore and interrogate current modern day anxieties, whether that's about truth or whether that's about justice. In a play like Punch, whether that's about masculinity and relationships, or in a play about Dear England, it's about national identity and about national cohesion and culture and history. I just like finding these stories and these that you can that hopefully on their own terms are really exciting because you're following a character, going on a journey with them, whether they succeed or fail, but just into them in a very light touch way. You get to explore big national themes, and why I think that's important. And I don't know if you agree, given your world, but certainly not on LeftLion, but in in other parts of our digital life, some of these places can be quite difficult and quite toxic and quite, I think, lacking nuance and lacking complexity. And they divide us rather than unite us. And there's something about theatre as a space which is a naturally unifying space. It's one of the last areas of our entertainment life anyway. If you think of films or streamers or watching a movie on your phone, it demands physical proximity with your community. You have to turn up and be with your neighbours in a space and watch a story live. And something really primal, something really mythic, without being a massive wanker, something really mythic kicks in when you do that, when you assemble together as a physical community. And I think that's so powerful. It would be such a waste not to use that to tell really big stories that ask really big questions about who we are as a country and as a community. And I never try to answer those questions. I don't think I know any better or any worse than you or anyone else why we are where we are, why we do what we do, what is Britain, what is our problems, what are the answers. I just like asking the questions and then letting the audience go away with their own viewpoints. So I think that's it really. Yeah, just real stories from our recent past that, unlike Twitter or social media or anything else, we approach with a slightly more empathetic and nuanced and unifying way, if that makes sense.
That makes loads of sense. I mean, clearly one thing you're very good at is, but I think one thing you're very good at, or at least maybe it's a byproduct of your art, is getting people that might not engage in theatre to the theatre. And Dear England obviously is probably the best example of that. But actually, a lot of your work's done that just by this current affairs hook. I mean, in back in 2017, doing a play about, Charles Ingram and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Yeah,
And it's, I mean, I don't need to tell you this, but it is helping get people into the theatre, and hence you've won awards. I mean, you won an OBE, didn't you, for services to British theatre,
I did.
which is
Yeah,
not bad because you're in your early 40s. Is that right?
I am. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, that was
Yeah.
that was nice. Yeah.
Tell us about that day. Did you get to meet Queen Elizabeth or?
No, the current king. He wasn't the king at the time, but yeah, it was Charles who gave me my little gong. Yeah, I mean that was very nice. I mean, just to do the normal hand wringing you feel like you have to do when you talk about honors. Like I didn't expect it. I didn't ask for it, and there was a brief moment when I went, "Oh God, is that something I should be accepting?" As nice as that is, because I probably have a very traditional view of what a political playwright is meant to represent and stand for. And obviously, it's to be aside from the establishment, looking at the establishment and making sure that you're free to interrogate it and poke it and be controversial if you need to be. And so I did sort of, yeah, probably overly thought about whether or not it was appropriate to accept that. Having said that, speaking to my family back in Kirkby, they were just like, "Oh, pull yourself together, James, for fuck's sake! Like, just it's brilliant. Like, you're from a working class background and you went to a state school and they want to give you a gong, so just go and get it and do it, and then you can hopefully that can be some kind of encouragement to kids in your school and your community to do similar things." So I was happy to accept eventually, and yes, I'm not going to lie, it was like a really nice day. I brought my mum down to London and got all dressed up, and it was actually because I received mine during COVID, so a weird thing happened where normally you have to go up and get your medal on your own, and have a brief 1 or 2 minutes with the member of the royal family who gives it to you. Because of COVID, the way they organised it was we had to move through the palace a bit different, so you had to take your guest up with you, and they were there when you received your medal. So I got to stand there with my mum, and so she got to meet the king, future king, as well. And basically, I barely got a word in edgeways. It was just my mum chatting to Charles and talking about various things. I can't even remember what they talked about, but that was very nice, and yeah, really lovely.
Hmm. So look, we've not even talked about your screen stuff yet. I mean, the so I think the first time I ever came across your work was watching, and I didn't really realize it was yours until recently. Was Brexit, the Uncivil War?
Okay, yeah.
Um, were you pleased with that? Were you, what was it like working with Benedict Cumberbatch and Rory Kinnear?
Yeah, great. I mean, when you that was the point in my writing life when you started to get to work with actors of a scale that both their abilities that you admire, but they're also really famous. That I mean, Rory Kinnear is I think one of our greatest stage actors. His Shakespearean work is extraordinary, and then Benedict Cumberbatch. He came straight from the set of Marvel to the Brexit film on Channel 4. So I think he just died as Doctor Strange in Avengers Infinity War and then comes back. That's not a spoiler. Um, so to work with someone like that whose career was clearly exploding in Hollywood, but was happy to come and do a very tiny independent Channel 4 film about the Brexit referendum was thrilling. And I got to work really close with Benedict. Actually, his process is that he really likes to work with the script and the writer, and we'd have lots and lots of conversations. And we both met the guy he played, Dominic Cummings, who remains a fascinating and controversial figure in British life. I find him completely fascinating and compelling. Yeah, I mean, I was happy. I mean, I was surprised at how controversial people found that when that was originally announced, and I think there was a trailer that was released by HBO. There was a huge, quite aggressive reaction against that, and actually mainly from the progressive left and the people who would normally sort of support and champion my work as politically minded work attacking the establishment. They were very anti there being a film about Brexit, which I guess they thought might mythologize and celebrate the so-called genius of Dominic Cummings, and people obviously feel very passionate that some people feel very passionate that he's damaged our political life and damaged our country, and I don't agree or disagree. My job was just to tell that story, but pertinent to what we've been talking about, like in the theatre, I write recent political stories all the time and put them on stage, and that doesn't seem controversial. That seems the point of drama on stage and political drama. But for some reason, it being on television, people kept saying, "Why are you doing this? It's too soon. It's too soon." Kept hearing these words, "It's too soon." That's alien to me. This idea that art, that drama, has to wait years and years and years to get in the way that journalism can react that day, that evening, the morning after. Why a columnist can be exploring Brexit in newspapers and online, why can't I be exploring it as a playwright? So I was surprised by that reaction. But I think once it came out, I hope people thought it was more fair-minded and less reckless than it may have seen as a project.
Hmm. I mean, I just thought it was fascinating to watch. I don't think I felt outraged, but I was glad I was glad to kind of see a rounded view of it, of all the events that
Sure.
happened, really.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I think like the thing about it for me was that the referendum up until that point had always been seen through the politicians. They were the main characters: David Cameron, Boris Johnson, Michael Gove. But actually, to me, it was the advisors behind the scene, the people who ran, for example, Vote Leave, who came up with those slogans, 350 million pounds on the bus, all that stuff. Like they're the ones who I think, whatever your politics, leave or remain, they're the ones whose legacy we are living in, and you can agree with and disagree with it, but we should interrogate it. So it felt right to be putting those people on screen. But also, I mean, God, I remember the day actually we felt there was a scene between Rory Kinnear and Benedict Cumberbatch as Dominic Cummings and Craig Oliver sat together in a pub, which I admit I entirely invented. I just needed to sort of get my protagonists together in a space. And I was really proud of that, not just to have those two world-class actors reading my dialogue in a big scene that felt like Pacino and De Niro in Heat, but that both sides got their point of view. You got someone going, advocating for leave, and someone advocating for remain, and that felt really important.
hmm. So shortly after that, you worked on The Crown, didn't you?
I did
Is
one
that right?
episode, yeah, season three, yeah.
What was it like working? I mean, that's Peter Morgan's baby, right? And what
Yeah.
was it like working with someone on their absolute baby? Like,
Yeah.
was he good to work with? Was it hard?
No, I really enjoyed him. I've admired him for years. He was like the standard bearer for the stuff I now like to write. He wrote The Deal back in the early 2000s, like which was about the Gordon Brown and Tony Blair deciding who was going to become leader of the Labour Party. That idea of popularizing these moments of history and getting big actors to play it, that's my bread and butter now, and he nailed that very early on. So big fan of his, but you're right, exactly. I mean, it's a strange thing to come into someone else's story and try to. You have to be really humble and understand the job, which is to slightly step out the way. My job is to kind of replicate Peter's voice and his characters that he's already built, and his style and his tone, and of course add my own little things in there and make sure I feel like I'm creatively fulfilled. But your job is to deliver something that's already been running for 2 years and keep it running. And you're right, that was this kind of a different skill. You're in someone else's playpen, playing by their rules. But I really enjoyed it, and I actually got my episode of The Crown. On paper, it sounds like the most boring one on earth, but it was the one where Prince Charles had to go and learn Welsh to make a speech at Carnarvon Castle. I know it's the stuff of movie thriller, but I really enjoyed it because it was very sort of a standalone episode, and I got to sort of introduce the modern Prince Charles character. It was the first time Josh O'Connor had played him, and you're sort of doing an origin story about why this young man became the way he became, a little bit based on what his relationship with his mother was, through the strange lens of having to learn Welsh in 6 weeks or something. But that was kind of in a nerdy way. That was really satisfying.
Mm. So now I want to talk about like what I think is your TV baby or playpen. It's Sherwood, right? Firstly, born and bred in Sherwood. Okay, born and bred forever in Sherwood.
Yeah.
Like what is it? And the thing I was going to say about that in particular is that I still, every time it comes out, I get texts from people going, "Is this where you live? Is this what it's like?" What does it feel like having that show? Because that's kind of like your name on the door. You know, you've done a lot of work, but really, you are the creator of that show as well as the writer, right?
Yeah, that was.
What does it mean to you? Sorry.
Means loads. No, don't. Means loads. I mean, yeah, you're right. That was the first time I've ever done a big returning series that keeps coming back every couple of years, and you're both the writer and the creator, but essentially the exec producer, the showrunner. So you are working with a team of people that you lead, coming up with new stories and new characters every series, and you build a project from the ground up. But obviously, why it means the most to me is the fact that I get to go on BBC One at 9 o'clock, with a big returning series that is set in my hometown with those voices and those characters and the people I grew up with and the politics I grew up with. That means the world. I mean, it means more in loads of ways. It's thrilling. We can talk about all the controversies around it if you want. Like, people are always criticizing the accents, and people are always and the politics are difficult as well. But in that first series in particular, that was loosely inspired by a couple of real life tragedies that happened up in Ashfield near, and indeed the first killing of a former miner with a guy with a crossbow who then fled into Sherwood Forest with a bow and arrow inexplicably. That was based on a story that happened only a few streets down from me, and I knew those people and I got to know them more making the show. And so, translating their story and their trauma and their pain into a television drama was it was difficult often and upsetting sometimes for everybody, but ultimately a real privilege to do that. And I was so grateful for their patience and taking me with them on that journey. That felt amazing to have like 10, I think it was like 5 million on a night and then 10 million people by the time it was caught up with. And as a playwright writing plays in a 50-seat pub, to getting 10 million people watching your show and it being from your set in your hometown, I don't think anything will come down the tracks in my life that will be sort of comparable for that. And then that feels like a once in a lifetime thing. And then stupid stuff that sounds like it doesn't matter, but it really does. Like getting, trucks and trucks of production vehicles from the BBC and all your actors to trundle down the path towards Newstead Abbey, or to be filming in Market Square or up at Nottingham Castle, and you've got David Morrissey over there and you've got Robert Lindsay over there. And part of your brain is going, I can't believe I've made something up, and now all these people have to come to my hometown and tell this story and stay in the local hotels and eat in the local pubs. That was brilliant. I just loved that. I loved forcing people to come to Nottinghamshire and tell this story with me, these world-class actors. And the fact that keeps continuing, we're about to start shooting I'm writing it as we speak, but we start work on the third series in late October. So yeah, here we go again. But yeah, really, really wonderful. I feel very lucky.
Amazing. I mean, I love watching it too. I particularly love like obviously I've got that local knowledge. So at one
Yeah,
point you'll see him in the council house, and then you'll see him in another building, and
yeah.
I love those little bits, the geekery of it, really that I have really. I think. And look, you say you've been criticised for the accents. I mean, I can't say all of them I thought were amazing. I thought some were. That the gangster family, I forget their name now, with Perry
Oh
Fitzpatrick.
yeah,
Is that
I've
his
got
name?
the Sparrow family.
They,
Yeah, Perry Fitzpatrick is
they've
great.
nailed it. They've nailed it totally. They've certainly nailed like a what I'd say is a Mansfield accent, or probably more like a Kirkby-in-Ashfield one, right?
But I think you've actually nailed what the slight problem, the challenge we face is as a perception because the accent in Nottingham city centre is so wildly different from the accent in the north of the county. Like, but that's got
Yeah,
really strong basic Yorkshire tones to it. Where I grew up, it basically sounds Yorkshire. We're only sort of 10 minutes from the South Yorkshire border. That's very different to the flat kind of Vicky McClure, Shane Meadows sounds that you get down in West Bridgeford or wherever. So we're sort of navigating that. So you bless these actors who come up and they listen, they walk around Nottinghamshire and go, I don't know what the accent is. It's different wherever I ever turn a corner. It goes up this way and that way. And they were, so it is a nightmare. But I don't look. Hey, if all they're criticizing is that and Meadows, people say Meadows has said too often in it. I'm like, come to Kirkby-in-Ashfield. Meadows every other word, mate. It's like a mate. But anyway, small gripes. And but I'm glad that. Thank you for watching it. Yeah, I felt yeah. That family you mentioned is one of my favorite. Those characters who live on the farm. Yeah, people like Lorraine Ashburn,
brilliant.
and a lot of those younger actors actually. They all come from the television
Yeah,
in Nottinghamshire. So just to get local actors onto the BBC and get them their first TV role is also dead important.
yeah. Oh, Television Workshop's great. I've done a lot of work with them, and what
Yeah, yeah.
amazing people come out of it.
Completely, yeah, yeah. We've worked with in the second series. We had Oliver Huntington who played the killer. Basically, any young actor who's in it, we owe a massive debt to the workshop. They're brilliant.
Mm. I wanted to ask, have you watched What It Feels Like for a Girl on
I
BBC?
have, yeah, yeah. I've not got to the end yet, but yeah, yeah,
So good again,
yeah.
so good and very like current, like obviously, but yeah, love it. And it's so remarkable seeing, our hometown in such big dramas, really. Like, that's
Oh,
very
that's Hucknall, isn't it? And yeah, it's no, I know a lot of those people, and I mentored the lead actor in that, Ellis Howard. He's a
okay.
budding screenwriter. He's great. So I've been developing some projects with him. Yeah, I totally agree. So I don't know whether Nottingham was just having a moment. There's actually I don't know if it's ever happened before actually, but in autumn there'll be two plays in the West End that are set in Nottingham. There's one called Till the Stars Come Down by Beth Steele that's running in the West End at the moment, and then when Punch arrives in mid-September, two West End houses will have big Nottinghamshire shows in it, and then you get shows like Sherwood and How to Be a Boy. So yeah, Nottingham. Who knows why the East Midlands? But I'm thrilled because the East Midlands has been neglected culturally far too long. I think we had the least level of investment culturally and the worst access to culture than almost any region in the country for about 10 years ago. So I'm delighted to be playing a very small part in aggressively reassessing that injustice.
You definitely are. Is there anyone you've not worked with yet that you'd like to? Like bucket list. Who would you like to work with?
Oh God, loads. Yeah, I mean, acting wise, that people like, I won't rest until I get to work with Julie Walters. I don't know why, but I keep offering her parts, and she's always busy. But she growing up with, I recently got to work with Alan Bleasdale, the Liverpool television writer, one of the greatest, the Scouse Arthur Miller, who did Boys from the Black Stuff and GBH, and he worked a lot with Julie Walters, and I grew up watching those dramas like Jake's Progress, and there's something about what she represents as a British working class woman who identified those comic but also meaty roles. That would be a dream. Um, yeah, other people I don't know. There's loads of sort of directors and choreographers and lighting designers, people who aren't household names, but yeah, you just hope that over the course of your life you'll get to work with these different people. Yeah.
Hmm. What What do you get up to when you're not working? when you're not writing? I mean, the answer might be nothing because I can see how busy you are, but I'm intrigued. Like, do you have hobbies? Do you?
Uh, no, it's really sad. I mean, obviously, I've got a life. At least I think I have a life. I've got friends, and I go out, and um, um, I mean, the fact that I can't answer that question is really fucking devastating. It's pretty full on at the moment. I've started, gosh, as I entered middle age, I started walking more. I like going to quiet country walks to a local pub, or getting some peace and quiet. That's quite nice. I try to read a bit, but that's really hard. Most of the stuff I read is because of what I have to research and learn for my projects. It's never for fun. Um, so yeah, pending. Come back to me in a year's time, and I'll have taken up pottery or wood whittling or something like that. But yeah, not at the moment.
LeftLion magazine is Nottingham's free printed culture guide. We aim to shine a light on the city and its culture, each month bringing you between 40 and 56 pages of independent local events and culture-based journalism. Every month we distribute between 10 and 15,000 copies for free in over 300 venues across the county. For example, you can find copies in every local library, every Castle Rock pub, in all active Nottingham leisure centres and in many other places besides. In line with our pledge to be a carbon neutral company, copies are delivered by our team on foot, by electric bike, or, if necessary, by vehicle. You can also read the full magazine online for free at leftlion.co.uk/magazine. If you'd like to promote your business or organisation with us, please visit leftlion.co.uk/advertise. And if you'd like to pitch us a story, please email editorial@leftlion.co.uk.
James Graham, everyone. So, Dear England shown at the Theatre Royal Nottingham from the 23rd to the 27th September. Tickets for it start at £29 each, which I can assure you is significantly cheaper than it ever was when this show was on in the West End. And James is also doing an In Conversation With event there on Thursday the 25th of September. Tickets for that are completely free, but probably already sold out by the time you listen to this. Punch is showing at the Samuel J. Friedman Theatre in Manhattan, New York from the 9th of September to the 2nd of November. It's directed by Adam Penford, who's another Nottingham lad who, as well as directing that play and others, is the artistic director of the Nottingham Playhouse. I had a look online at tickets for that, and they start at around $98 each. But on the off chance you're over there on holiday, it's got to be worth it. There's no date yet set for the new series of Sherwood, but it's probably likely to be sometime next year that it'll be on TV. However, the first two series are there for you right now on the iPlayer, so if you want to have a go up at lots of local locations through a BBC drama lens, then now is your time. You can also watch Brexit, the Uncivil War on Netflix, and Brian and Maggie, which we didn't even talk about, but which is about Brian Walden, the journalist, and Margaret Thatcher, the former Prime Minister, and stars Steve Coogan. That's on 4OD right now and available to watch for free as long as you don't mind the adverts. Thanks for listening right to the end. Last of all, we'd like to say a big happy birthday to the Theatre Royal on the 160th birthday. I can't wait to come and watch Dear England at your place to celebrate. Bye bye.